The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. Every eye in that ballroom turned to me, the woman they'd called a fraud for 3 years. But as Admiral Benjamin Cross stepped forward, his weathered hands holding a medal I thought I'd never see again, their laughter died in their throats. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cut through the silence like a blade, "allow me to introduce Commander Elena Vasquez, my chosen successor, and the most decorated covert operative in naval intelligence history." The same people who had whispered stolen valor behind my back now stood frozen, because they were about to learn that sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves about who deserves respect. My name is Elena Vasquez, and for 3 years, I lived as a ghost in plain sight. The morning I walked away from my military life, I stared at civilian clothes hanging in my closet. A simple blouse, dark slacks, the costume of a woman who had never led classified missions or briefed admirals on matters of national security. 3 months earlier, Commander Elena Vasquez had died in an explosion in the South China Sea. At least that's what the classified report said. The woman standing in that bedroom was nobody. A clean slate. A cover identity so deep that even I sometimes forgot who I really was. "Time to disappear, Commander," Admiral Cross had told me in that sterile military hospital. "The world needs to think Elena Vasquez is dead. Your country needs you to become someone else." So I became someone else. I rented a small apartment in Virginia Beach. I created a resume that listed my rank as lieutenant, a careful fabrication that would hide my real service record. I buried Commander Vasquez so deep that sometimes I wondered if she would ever surface again. The job posting at Meridian Defense Solutions appeared on a Tuesday morning. Security consultant, military experience preferred. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, one of the most experienced intelligence officers in the country, applying for an entry-level position. But I needed normalcy. After years of living in shadows, planning operations that could shift global power, I craved something simple, something safe. I should have known safety was an illusion. Meridian Defense Solutions occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Norfolk. The lobby screamed corporate success, polished granite, abstract art, the kind of environment where people took themselves very seriously. "Elena Vasquez," I told the receptionist. "I have an interview with Marcus Brennan." She looked me up and down, noting my conservative suit and military bearing. "Mr. Brennan is our senior director. You'll be working under him if selected." Marcus Brennan's office was a monument to corporate achievement. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Norfolk Harbor, where Navy ships sat like sleeping giants. Awards covered one wall, documenting a career built on climbing ladders rather than leading troops. Marcus himself was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, silver temples, expensive suit. His handshake was precisely timed. 3 seconds, no more, no less. The handshake of someone who had read leadership books, but never made life-or-death decisions. "Welcome to Meridian, Elena," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. "We're excited to have real military experience on the team." Real military experience. If only he knew the woman sitting across from him had planned psychological operations in 3 theaters, developed counterintelligence protocols still used by half the Navy, and carried secrets that could reshape international relations. "Thank you, sir," I replied. "I'm looking forward to contributing." He outlined the position for 20 minutes. Basic security consulting, risk assessment for corporate clients, analysis of potential threats. All routine, all safe, all designed for someone with exactly the background my fake resume suggested. "Your primary focus will be corporate security protocols," Marcus explained. "We have Fortune 500 clients who need advice on protecting facilities and personnel. Think you can handle that, Lieutenant?" "Lieutenant?" The rank tasted like copper, but I smiled and nodded, playing the grateful veteran looking for opportunity. "Absolutely, sir." What I didn't say was that I had designed security protocols for facilities that didn't exist on maps, that I had protected personnel whose names were classified at levels he couldn't comprehend, that calling me lieutenant was like calling a symphony conductor a triangle player. I signed the employment agreement and accepted my new identity as Elena Vasquez, Lieutenant Security Consultant. It was the beginning of my nightmare. The first weeks at Meridian were blissfully normal. I kept my head down, completed assignments, tried to remember what it felt like to worry about quarterly reports instead of international incidents. My colleagues seemed pleasant enough. Jessica Holt, vice president of client relations, wore her MBA like armor and had opinions about everything. David Chen managed IT security and spoke in acronyms. Rebecca Torres handled international contracts and had a laugh that carried 3 cubicles away. They welcomed me with careful politeness, asking about my background and sharing career stories. I gave them the sanitized version: 4 years Navy, basic training, standard assignments. Nothing that would raise eyebrows. But questions came anyway. During my second week, we reviewed security protocols for a pharmaceutical company worried about industrial espionage. Marcus assigned me to develop comprehensive protection strategies. I submitted recommendations Thursday afternoon: multi-layered access controls, psychological profiling of potential threats, counter-surveillance techniques designed to identify hostile intelligence operations. It was thorough, detailed, based on methods I had used protecting installations with the military's most sensitive secrets. Marcus called me in Friday morning. My report spread across his desk like evidence. "Elena, this is impressive work," he said, confusion in his tone rather than praise. "Where did you learn psychological profiling techniques? This level of counter-surveillance analysis?" Warning bells rang in my chest. "Standard Navy training, sir. Security protocols are basic military education." He frowned, flipping pages. "But some of these methods seem advanced for basic training. Multi-phase threat assessment, psychological markers for identifying potential assets." His eyes sharpened. "Are you sure this is lieutenant-level knowledge?" The truth was, psychological profiling had been my specialty in naval intelligence. I had developed some techniques myself during operations in Eastern Europe and the South China Sea, but I couldn't tell him that. "I may have done additional reading," I said carefully. "Security is a passion." He nodded slowly, doubt taking root. "Right. Well, excellent work. Maybe tone it down for corporate clients. We don't want to overwhelm them with theoretical concepts." Theoretical concepts. My life's work, dismissed as academic exercises. That afternoon, I heard Jessica talking to David by the coffee machine. "Did you see Elena's pharmaceutical report?" Jessica was saying. "Those recommendations seem sophisticated for a lieutenant." "What do you mean?" "My brother-in-law is a major, and he's never heard of half those techniques. Makes you wonder where she really learned them." I poured coffee slowly, keeping my face neutral while my stomach twisted. This was how it started. Small doubts, innocent questions that would grow into accusations. Over the following weeks, questions became more frequent. During meetings, my suggestions met raised eyebrows and subtle challenges. When I referenced military protocols, someone inevitably asked for clarification. The easy camaraderie of my first days eroded, replaced by careful distance that made me feel like a fraud, even though I was the only one telling the truth. The turning point came during my 3rd month. We were working on a high-profile contract with an international shipping company experiencing security breaches at Pacific terminals. The client was nervous about foreign intelligence infiltration and wanted comprehensive counterintelligence strategy. Marcus assigned the project to our entire team, making clear my military background would be crucial. It should have been an opportunity to shine. Instead, it became my downfall. I threw myself into the project, drawing on years combating foreign intelligence operations. I analyzed vulnerabilities, identified infiltration vectors, developed multi-layered defense strategies that would have impressed Langley analysts. My section covered psychological operations, communication security, asset recruitment patterns, areas where I had extensive field experience. I cited open-source materials carefully, avoiding anything revealing classified knowledge, but the depth was impossible to hide. The presentation was scheduled Friday afternoon in Meridian's main conference room. Our client, James Morrison, was the shipping company's chief security officer, former FBI with sharp eyes and skeptical demeanor. I stood at the front, laser pointer in hand, walking through slides representing distilled versions of everything I knew about protecting vital assets from foreign intelligence. I explained how hostile services recruit assets, establish cover identities, exploit human psychology for sensitive information access. Morrison listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking pointed questions demonstrating his own experience. Marcus and my team seemed impressed, and I began relaxing, thinking perhaps I had found ways to use real expertise without revealing true background. Then Morrison asked the question that changed everything. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, leaning forward, "this is remarkably sophisticated analysis. The psychological profiling techniques, communication security protocols. Where exactly did you encounter these methods during Navy service? Silence. I felt Marcus's eyes, saw Jessica taking notes. David had stopped checking his phone and stared with obvious curiosity. Standard Navy training covers basic counterintelligence principles, I replied steadily despite building panic. I supplemented with independent study of threat assessment methodologies. Morrison's expression didn't change, but I saw him processing. Independent study. I see. Because some techniques you've described are taught at very specific institutions. Institutions requiring elevated security clearances. My mouth went dry. Morrison wasn't just former FBI. He understood the intelligence community well enough to recognize advanced training. He was starting to suspect my background didn't match my alleged rank. I've always been interested in security studies, I said weakly. Interesting. Morrison made notes. Regardless of where you learned these techniques, they're exactly what we need. Excellent work. The meeting ended with handshakes and follow-up promises, but I felt the atmosphere shift. My colleagues looked at me differently, expressions mixing confusion with suspicion. After Morrison left, Marcus asked me to stay for quick debrief. The team filed out, leaving us alone with harbor views. Elena, Marcus began carefully. Impressive presentation. Our client was clearly satisfied. Thank you, sir. But I have to ask. He paused, choosing words carefully. Some material you presented goes well beyond what I'd expect from lieutenant training. Psychological profiling techniques, asset recruitment patterns. These are advanced concepts. Here it comes, I thought, the moment my cover story begins unraveling. As I mentioned, I've done independent study. Right, Marcus interrupted. Independent study. Elena, I need to be direct. Some team members have raised questions about your military background. Nothing serious, he added quickly, but enough to make me think we should verify resume details. Verify. The word hit like a physical blow, because verification would lead to the public record of Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, carefully constructed to hide Commander Elena Vasquez, whose real service history was classified at levels that would make Marcus's clearance look like a library card. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, struggling to stay level. Just routine verification. We check military records for all security background employees. Standard procedure. His smile was apologetic, but firm. I'm sure everything will check out fine. That weekend, I sat in my apartment staring at the official Navy photograph on my mantelpiece, the only picture kept from my old life. Commander Elena Vasquez looked back, uniform crisp, expression confident. She had no idea that 3 years later, she would be accused of stealing her own valor. Monday brought inevitable confrontation. Elena, we need to talk. Marcus's voice was tight. Tuesday morning, Jessica was already seated across from his desk, her expression mixing disappointment with vindication. I took the remaining chair, hands steady despite adrenaline. Years of training had taught me to remain calm under pressure, even when that pressure came from accusations rather than enemy fire. We've completed verification of your military service record, Marcus continued, sliding a folder across, and we've discovered significant discrepancies. I opened the folder and saw my own cover identity staring back. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez. 4 years service, standard security clearance, basic tactical training, no mention of naval intelligence, no record of classified operations, no indication this woman had ever been anything more than a junior officer. Your record shows lieutenant, Jessica said sharply, but the knowledge you've demonstrated, techniques you've referenced. Elena, no lieutenant has access to that classified information level. Marcus leaned forward gravely. The psychological profiling methods you presented last week, those are taught at specialized intelligence schools requiring security clearances well above lieutenant level. Not to mention, Jessica added, some protocols you've suggested don't appear in any public training materials. It's almost like you have first-hand experience with classified operations. They were right, of course. I did have first-hand experience, but that experience belonged to Commander Elena Vasquez, who was officially dead. The woman in that office was supposed to be nobody special. I've studied these subjects extensively, I said, falling back on prepared cover. Security analysis is a passion. I've read everything available. Reading about something and knowing how to implement it are different things, Marcus replied. Elena, we think you've been embellishing your military background, inflating your rank and experience. The words hung like smoke from an explosion. Embellishing. inflating. They were accusing me of stolen valor, the one accusation that could destroy any veteran's reputation permanently. That's a serious allegation, I said quietly. Stolen valor is a serious crime, Jessica shot back. We have employees who served honorably, earned their ranks through dedication. For someone to claim achievements they never earned. She didn't finish, but the implication was clear. I was a fraud, a liar, a woman who had stolen real heroes' valor to advance her career. I served honorably, I whispered. As a lieutenant, Marcus pressed. But you've been acting like you outrank everyone here. The way you analyze threats, develop protocols, discuss classified methodologies with confidence. Elena, if you're really just a lieutenant, how do you explain that expertise? How do you explain 12 years serving your country? How do you explain missions that saved lives and prevented international incidents? How do you explain sacrificing your own identity to protect operations that could never see daylight? You don't, because all of that belongs to a woman who's supposed to be dead. I can't explain it, I said finally, words tasting like surrender. Marcus nodded grimly. Elena, we're placing you on administrative leave while we investigate further. If we determine you've misrepresented military service, he didn't need to finish the threat. We all knew what happened to people caught committing stolen valor. Public disgrace, criminal charges, complete destruction of reputation and career. Administrative leave stretched into investigation, which stretched into nightmare. For 6 weeks, I sat in my apartment waiting for a call that would either clear my name or destroy what remained of my life. The call came on a rainy Thursday in November. Elena, this is Marcus. We've completed our investigation. His voice was formal, distant. We're terminating your employment with Meridian Defense Solutions. I closed my eyes, feeling the last piece of my civilian life crumble. On what grounds? Misrepresentation of military service, inflated credentials, stolen valor. Each accusation hit like hammer blows. Elena, we can't have someone whose military background doesn't match their claimed expertise. And if I can prove my credentials are legitimate? Long pause. Elena, we've verified your record through official channels. Unless you're claiming the Navy made documentation errors, he waited for me to either confess to fraud or make an even more ridiculous claim. Because who would believe the Navy had created false identity for one of their most decorated officers? I understand, I said quietly. Word spread quickly through Norfolk's defense contractor community. Elena Vasquez, the woman who claimed to be more than she was. Within weeks, every security firm in the region knew my name and alleged crimes. Job interviews became public humiliation exercises. Potential employers reviewed my resume with skeptical expressions, asking pointed questions about military service and requesting documentation I couldn't provide. After 3 months of rejections, I stopped applying for security positions. I took a job at a local coffee shop, serving lattes to Navy personnel who didn't recognize the woman behind the counter as someone who had once briefed admirals on national security matters. The work was simple, honest, utterly soul-crushing. I spent days making small talk while my real achievements rotted in classified files I could never reference. Coffee shop colleagues treated me with careful sympathy reserved for veterans who had struggled to adjust to civilian life. The isolation was worse than humiliation. I had no friends to confide in, no family who understood what I was going through. The real Elena Vasquez had died in that explosion 3 years ago, taking with her all relationships and connections that might have sustained me through this nightmare. I was a ghost, haunting my own life, carrying secrets that grew heavier each day. By December, I had convinced myself that rock bottom was permanent residence. I worked coffee shop shifts, came home to my empty apartment, tried not to think about the life I had lost or the woman I used to be. Then came the invitation that would change everything. Meridian Defense Solutions cordially invites you to our annual holiday celebration. The engraved card arrived Tuesday, forwarded from my old address. Someone in HR had obviously made a mistake, adding my name out of habit or oversight. I should have thrown it away, should have spent the evening safely anonymous, nursing wounds in private. But something about that invitation called to me. Maybe pride, maybe masochism, maybe desperate need to prove I could face my accusers without falling apart. The party was held at the Grandview Hotel, Norfolk's most prestigious venue. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, and the city's defense industry elite mingled with champagne and carefully crafted conversations about contracts and clearances. I wore a simple black dress, the only formal wear I owned without military insignia. My hair was pulled back in regulation bun out of habit, and I carried myself with bearing that 12 years of service had made automatic. The moment I walked into the ballroom, conversations faltered. I was the pariah, the fraud, the woman whose disgrace had become legend in Norfolk's defense circles. People stared with morbid fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. Marcus was holding court near the bar, entertaining clients and colleagues with what I was certain was a sanitized version of my deception. His voice carried across the room, confident and self-righteous. Completely fabricated her military background. Can you imagine? In this day and age, with everything our real veterans have sacrificed. I ordered champagne from a server who avoided eye contact, clearly recognizing me from whispered stories circulating through the industry. Finding a corner where I could observe without being observed, I settled in to endure whatever remained of my professional reputation being dismantled publicly. That's when I saw him. Admiral Benjamin Cross stood near the entrance, his dress uniform immaculate, weathered face scanning the crowd with practiced command eyes. He was older than when I had last seen him, more silver hair, deeper lines, but his presence still commanded every room he entered. My blood turned to ice. What was Admiral Cross doing at a corporate Christmas party? How had he found me after 3 years of carefully maintained separation? Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment, stretching like eternity, time stopped. Then he smiled, that small, knowing expression that had preceded every impossible mission he had ever assigned me. He began walking toward me, cutting through the crowd with confident stride of someone who had never doubted his right to be in any room. Conversations parted around him like water around a ship's bow. Marcus was still talking, still entertaining his audience with stories of my alleged deception, when Admiral Cross stopped directly behind him. "Excuse me?" The Admiral's voice cut through conversation like a battle command. "Did I hear you mention Elena Vasquez?" Marcus turned, face flushing when he saw the Admiral's uniform, ribbons and medals marking a career of distinguished service at Naval Command's highest levels. The confident executive who had been holding court suddenly looked like a child caught talking back to his teacher. "Admiral," Marcus stammered. "Yes, sir. We were discussing a personnel matter." "What kind of personnel matter?" Admiral Cross's tone was deceptively mild, but I could hear the steel underneath. The ballroom had grown quiet, conversations dying as people noticed the Admiral's presence and sensed something significant about to happen. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing he was out of his depth, but unable to back down gracefully. "Well, sir, we had an employee who was misrepresenting her military service. Claims to have knowledge and experience well beyond her documented rank." Admiral Cross's expression didn't change, but I saw a slight tightening around his eyes, the same expression he had worn when briefing me on missions that officially didn't exist. "Her documented rank," he repeated slowly. "And what rank was that?" "Lieutenant, sir?" Jessica chimed in, stepping forward with confidence of someone believing they were on Justice's right side. But she acted like she knew classified protocols, advanced intelligence methodologies. It was clear she was lying about her service level. "Lying?" Admiral Cross tested the word like examining evidence. "And what makes you so certain she was lying?" Marcus puffed up, drawing confidence from his research and conviction that he had uncovered fraud. "We verified her record, Admiral. Elena Vasquez was listed as lieutenant, and frankly, some things she claimed to know, well, they're well above any lieutenant's clearance level." "You verified her record," Admiral Cross said, voice taking prosecutor tone who had just heard confession. "Tell me, which record did you access?" "The standard military personnel database, of course," Marcus replied, confused by the question. "The public database." It wasn't a question. The unclassified personnel records available to civilian employers for basic verification. Something in the Admiral's tone made Marcus step back. "Sir, I don't understand. Allow me to clarify." Admiral Cross's voice carried to every corner of the now silent ballroom. "The Elena Vasquez record you accessed was a cover identity, a carefully constructed legend designed to protect an officer whose real service history is classified at levels your security clearance couldn't begin to comprehend." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a metal case, its deep blue velvet catching light from crystal chandeliers. "Elena Vasquez wasn't a lieutenant. She is a commander. My commander. And the operations she led, the lives she saved, The enemies she defeated. They're locked in files that sitting presidents need special authorization to read. Marcus's champagne glass slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against marble floor with a sound like breaking bones. Admiral Cross opened the metal case with ceremonial precision, revealing the Navy Cross nestled in blue velvet. The metal caught light, its bronze and blue ribbon stark contrast to the sterile corporate environment. Commander Elena Vasquez earned this medal for actions that officially never happened, in a place that doesn't exist on any map, the Admiral announced, voice carrying absolute authority weight. She spent 3 years believing the world thought she was dead, because that's what her country asked of her. She sacrificed her identity, her career, her life as she knew it, so that operations vital to national security could remain classified. He looked directly at me, eyes holding shared secrets and impossible choices weight. "Commander, would you please step forward?" My legs felt like water, but I walked toward him through the silent crowd, feeling every eye tracking my movement. The same people who had whispered about stolen valor now watched in stunned silence as their reality rearranged itself around them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Cross continued, voice filling the cavernous space, "allow me to properly introduce Commander Elena Vasquez, the woman who single-handedly prevented a war in the South China Sea, the officer who developed counterintelligence protocols that half our Pacific Fleet still uses today, the soldier who gave up everything, her rank, her decorations, her very existence, so that our nation's most sensitive operations could be successfully completed." He pinned the Navy Cross to my dress with movements both precise and reverent. The medal's weight against my chest was like coming home after years of exile. "And, as of tonight," Admiral Cross announced, "my chosen successor as the next Director of Naval Intelligence." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my heartbeat, feel 3 years of accusations and humiliation lifting from my shoulders like physical burden being removed. Marcus stood frozen, face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and dawning horror as he realized his mistake's magnitude. Jessica had gone pale, her accusations echoing like thunder. David had dropped his phone, and Rebecca stared as if seeing me for the first time. "But sir," Marcus managed to stammer. "Her record showed—" "Her cover record," Admiral Cross corrected with patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "The identity we created to protect her while she transitioned back to civilian life after being officially declared dead. The record you used to accuse a decorated war hero of stolen valor. 6 months later, I stood in my Pentagon office, wearing dress uniform for the first time in 3 years. Stars on my shoulders caught morning light streaming through windows overlooking the Potomac River and the city I had served in shadow for so long. My desk held intelligence reports that would shape national security policy for years. Files marked with classifications most people had never heard of. The real work of protecting a nation. Work that would never make headlines or earn public recognition. A knock interrupted my thoughts. My aide entered with a message. "Ma'am, there's a civilian here to see you. Says his name is Marcus Brennan?" I smiled. "Send him in." Marcus entered looking older, more careful than the confident executive I had known. He wore a simple suit instead of usual designer attire, and his handshake was tentative. "Commander Vasquez," he said formally. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Marcus?" He took a deep breath like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. "I wanted to offer you something. A position at Meridian. Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations. Full authority over all military consulting. Your own team, unlimited budget." He paused, meeting my eyes. "It's the least we can do after what we put you through." I leaned back, studying this man who had once questioned my honor, based on incomplete information. "That's generous. You deserve it. What we did to you." He shook his head, mistake weight still heavy on his shoulders. "I've been thinking about it every day for 6 months. How we destroyed your reputation over something we didn't understand. And what did you learn from that experience?" His eyes met mine, and I saw genuine remorse. That judgment without understanding is just prejudice in a nice suit. That some people carry secrets not because they're liars, but because they're heroes. That the most dangerous assumption is thinking you know the whole story. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the river where morning joggers were beginning daily routes. Normal people living normal lives, protected by secrets they would never know existed. "Marcus," I said without turning, "do you know what the hardest part of my job is?" "No, ma'am." It's not the classified operations or enemy agents or life or death decisions. It's knowing that the people I protect will never know I exist, that my greatest victories will never be celebrated, that my worst failures will never be mourned. I turned back to him. I spent 3 years learning what it feels like to be dismissed, underestimated, accused of being less than I am. It was the most valuable education I've ever received. I don't understand. It taught me humility. It reminded me that every person has a story deeper than what appears on the surface. It showed me that judgment without understanding is one of the most dangerous weapons we possess. I returned to my desk. Decision made. Thank you for the offer, Marcus. But I have work to do here. Work that matters. He nodded slowly, understanding this was about more than career advancement. If there's ever anything I can do, remember this conversation the next time you meet someone whose story doesn't make sense. Remember that the most extraordinary people often look completely ordinary until the moment they reveal who they really are. My name is Elena Vasquez. I am a commander in the United States Navy and director of naval intelligence. I have served my country in ways that can never be publicly acknowledged, and I carry secrets that would redefine global politics if they ever saw daylight. For 3 years, I lived as a ghost, accused of stealing valor while being unable to reveal I was one of those heroes. I learned what it means to be dismissed, underestimated, judged by people who couldn't comprehend my service depth. But in the end, truth has its own gravity. It pulls everything into its orbit, reshaping reality until what remains is simply this. Some people are exactly who they appear to be. Others are so much more than the world is ready to handle. The champagne glass shattering against marble floor. The silence that followed Admiral Cross's words. The moment when 3 years of accusations died in my accusers' throats. That was my final revelation. Not just the truth about who I was, but understanding of who I had always been. Even when the world tried to convince me I was someone smaller. Some victories are public. Some happen in shadows. And some happen in ballrooms full of people who thought they knew your story. But the most important victory happens inside your own heart, when you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. You know what hurts the most? After sharing my story with you, after opening my heart about the darkest 3 years of my life, I see that barely anyone hits that subscribe button. I don't ask for money. I don't ask you to buy anything. All I need is that one small click. It's free. It takes 2 seconds. And it's the only way you can help me keep telling these stories. Stories of people like me, who were broken down, humiliated, dismissed, until the moment everything changed. If my story touched you, if you felt that moment when Admiral Cross revealed the truth, if you understand what it means to be underestimated, then please, just hit subscribe. Because right now, someone else out there is living their own nightmare, waiting for their final revelation. And your subscription helps me reach them. That's all I ask. Just subscribe. It's free, and it means everything. Thank you for listening to my story.